another episode of Norman's Asian Home Cooking. Today we're going to be making cucumbers and pork. Chinese wok-fried cucumbers and pork. Okay. So, as the name of the dish suggests, before I get into the actual cooking of the dish, let me just introduce it very briefly. As the name of the dish suggests, our main two ingredients are going to be cucumber and pork. Let's talk a little bit about the cucumber because it's the most important ingredient in the dish. Okay. The best cucumber to use for this dish is, in America it would be called an English cucumber or seedless cucumber. So these really long ones that you can usually, they're in grocery stores all over the place now, and oftentimes in American grocery stores you'll see them wrapped up in plastic wrap individually. Okay? These are the best ones. They are not very bitter. They have a very thin and soft skin, and the seeds are not going to interfere with the dish. Okay, so this is the kind of cucumber that you ideally want for this stir fry. Okay, now you can also, if you don't have this at home and you don't feel like going to the grocery store, and you only have these, sort of regular slicing cucumbers, so the sort of fatter, shorter cucumbers, you could use those. They're not going to be as good, but you could use those. I would just peel them and then slice them down lengthwise and scoop out all of the seeds. The seeds are very large in those, right? So you'll want to remove those seeds. Okay, but you could certainly use them. Pickling cucumbers, if you find pickling cucumbers, the shorter, smaller ones, you could also use those as well, but again, I would remove the seeds. For the English cucumbers or the seedless cucumbers, you don't need to remove the seeds, right? And I love this dish because I think it introduces a new way, in many respects, to enjoy this humble vegetable, right? So cucumbers have a long and illustrious history in mankind. We know, for example, that the ancient Egyptians ate them, and at least they were eaten in ancient Egypt. The Bible, for example, records in the Old Testament, in the book of Numbers, which details Moses leading the Israelites and their journey towards the Promised Land, right? Cucumbers are mentioned. When the Israelites are on the journey and grumbling and thinking about food that they had eaten in ancient Egypt, one of the foods they mention is the cucumber. Okay? Cucumbers are also mentioned in the Chinese Confucian classic ancient text, the leeched, or in English known as the Book of Rites. There's a section in the Book of Rites which talks about ritual feasts, ritual meals of importance, and they list all kinds of ingredients. And one of the ingredients that listed is the cucumber. So we do know that they were eaten in China over 2,000 years ago. So this is a humble vegetable, right? If any of you guys have read Gulliver's Travels by the Irish author Jonathan Swift, the 18th century novel Gulliver's Travels, cucumbers are also mentioned there. Although cucumbers are they're sort of used as a joke when the main character Gulliver goes to the city of Legato. I think it's called Legato. One of his first stops is the academy, where scientists and professors and scholars work. And the first person he meets there is this guy who has been spending 8 years trying to extract some sunbeams out of cucumbers. Okay? Of course, it's a satirical story. You can't extract sunlight out of cucumbers, but nevertheless, the point of this rambling, if you will, is that cucumbers have long and illustrious history. And so therefore they're an ingredient that deserves respect. Now, if I ask you, how have you eaten cucumbers, right? I think many of you might say, well, I eat them as pickles, right? Or some of you, I think it's very common that many of you have eaten them as in salads, in raw form. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. But in Chinese cooking, ethnic Chinese people eat cucumbers, of course, raw in salads as well. Okay? It's a common misconception that in Chinese cuisine there's no salad or raw foods. No, there are salads in Chinese cuisine, and there's this, for example, there's a very popular Chinese salad called cucumber salad, which is made with smashed cucumbers, garlic, chili, a little bit of soy and vinegar. Very delicious. But ethnic Chinese also eat cucumbers cooked, and by cooked I mean stir-fried, sautéed, in soups, in stews, in hot pot, right? So if you've never had cucumber cooked, I really do recommend that you try it. It'll open up your horizons, and if you think about cucumbers, it's a great thing to have at home because first of all, they are relatively inexpensive. They keep for a long time in the fridge, as opposed to leafy vegetables, which may wilt and turn sort of yucky after just 1 or 2 days. And if you are really busy and you don't have much time to get dinner on the table, cucumbers are so simple. You'll see this dish is so simple and quick because for cucumbers you basically just wash it very quickly, the outside. Whereas for leafy vegetables, like if you're doing spinach, you've got to spend probably 20-30 minutes washing it, make sure you get all the sand out, and you could spend 20 seconds washing a cucumber. So I'm going to show you how to do this dish. Okay, so let me now start the dish. So we'll start with the cucumber, okay, and I'll show you how to do it. So the first thing you do is cut the ends off. Then you have this long cucumber here, right? And you want to slice it in half. But the key is to slice it in half at an angle. Okay, I'll show you. Here, angle, okay? About, I would say, 30-degree angle, like this. Okay? So you can see, it looks like this. Okay. Now, what you want to do is do thin slices but on an angle, on a bias. The reason we do this is it'll increase the surface area, which will make the stir fry much easier and also more efficient. Okay, and so you want them thin. Okay, thin slices, quite thin. But wash your hands. And this cucumber's already washed, by the way. And if you have a mandolin, you could also use a mandolin, and do it that way. I don't have a mandolin, and plus, I think mandolin is extremely dangerous. There have been news reports of people going to the emergency room because their hands have slipped on the mandolin, and they basically, it's horrible. Right? So I don't have a mandolin. I don't plan to get one. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way, and let your knife do the work. Just very thin slices like this. Okay. So I'll show you one. Let's see. Okay. So just go down the cucumber. Remember, keep it on the bias. Now what we're going to be doing is, just to give you a preview, because there's a lot of water in cucumbers, right? One of the things that you need to do is we're going to salt them. Okay? We're going to salt them and then wait maybe 5 to 10 minutes for excess water to leach out. And then you're going to rinse the cucumbers, okay, squeezing the water out and get the salt off, and then drying them. Okay, and then, only then will we start stir frying. So that's the other one. Okay. Cucumbers, also one interesting fact about cucumbers. If you remember the last episode we did eggs and tomatoes, and I had mentioned that tomatoes were introduced to China and Italy from the New World. Cucumbers is an interesting ingredient because it was one of the ingredients that actually was introduced to the New World from the Old World. Okay? So we know the ancient Egyptians grew cucumbers. We know Greeks and Romans also grew cucumbers. So cucumbers were basically already in Europe. And of course, as I mentioned, in Chinese history, we have written records to suggest that cucumbers have been eaten since, for over 2,000 years. Okay. And so that's the cucumber. And then get a bowl. This is a Chinese cleaver, which I usually use for Chinese cooking. And the great thing about cleaver is it doubles as a spatula. Put it in a bowl like this. Scrape it up. Okay, so we've got them in the bowl like this, and now salt them. Okay, so just take regular salt, just regular salt, not pickling seasoning or anything like that. Just regular salt. I'm not sure how much that is. 2 teaspoons, 3 teaspoons or so. And then just toss. I'm trying to look cool, but I really can't toss it very well, so I'm going to surrender and use my hands like this. Just make sure that the salt touches or adheres to the cucumber, right? Because there's a lot of, as you all know, there's a lot of indigenous water lodged in the cucumber, and we want to get that out, because if we don't get that out, the stir fry is just going to get too watery and disgusting. Okay? And you'll notice that when you do this technique, this is a very critical technique for this dish. You must do this. If you don't, the dish gets quite watery, and the cucumbers become too soft. By doing it this way, you will remove the excess water, and then when you stir fry them, the cucumbers become crispy, okay, and delicious. Okay. So we're going to set this aside. Okay. Now, while that's going on, let me show you what else. Let me just rinse my hands to get the salt off. Okay. While that's going on, let me show you what other ingredients we have. So cucumbers and pork. So obviously the second important ingredient is pork. Okay, now I've already sliced the pork. This is pork loin. What you can do is, if you go to the supermarket, they sell the really long pork loins, pork tenderloins, like in a vacuum pack. You could buy one of those, and then when you get home, slice them into basically chops, and then put each of them in a Ziploc baggie and then freeze them. And then whenever you need pork, you can get it. Now what I've done is I've taken a pork loin, and first of all I've made very thin slices lengthwise, okay? And then I stack them up, and then I shred them into small, essentially, I guess the French culinary term would be thin julienne, okay? So let me just get a chopstick and let me show you what each strand looks like. Chopstick. Okay, so I'll show you what. See, thin julienne. Thin julienne. Okay. Okay. Now, marinate. Now this is very important because I'm going to show you how to marinate this, and this is an all-purpose. I like to call it an all-purpose Chinese marinade. So if you're sautéing, stir-frying meat for a dish, you can use this marinade, okay, and it will be, it'll keep your meat tender and also very flavorful. Now let me just add something very quickly here. We're using pork in this dish, but you could easily use chicken, boneless chicken breast or boneless chicken thigh, and you slice it thin and then julienne it like this. You can use that perfectly okay. And chicken, you could use beef if you wanted to, I guess. Same technique. Try to get it thin. If you have like a filet mignon or a ribeye or a sirloin, okay. Personally though, I would recommend using pork, and if you don't have pork, use chicken. Beef has too strong of a flavor, I think, for this dish, and it's liable to, it's probably going to overpower the final dish. Okay, but also if you're vegetarian and if you can eat eggs, you could easily substitute this with scrambled eggs. Right? So remember the last episode we did eggs and tomatoes. I showed you how to do scrambled eggs Chinese style. Well, scramble those eggs, set them aside, and then in lieu of the meat, you can add them in the dish, and you'll have a vegetarian version, provided that the vegetarian can eat eggs, of course. Okay, so let me show you how to do the marinade, and this will help keep your meat nice and tender. Okay. By the way, a quick tip: if you are chopping vegetables and things for this dish and your pork, always remember chop your raw meat at the very, very end, because if you chop this first, your cutting board is going to have all that raw meat and bacteria, and then if you cut the cucumber and all the other things, it's going to contaminate those ingredients. So cut all of your vegetables and things like that, and then cut the raw meat at the end, and then you can just wash the cutting board with hot soapy water, and you're not going to contaminate your cucumbers or things like that. Okay, so let me show you what goes in the marinade. Okay, let me just set the chopsticks down here. Okay, so there are dry and wet ingredients for the marinade. Always add your dry ingredients first, because then when you add the wet ingredients, it helps mix it better. So, first we have cornstarch, or corn flour. This is available in any supermarket, and this is a very important ingredient for Chinese cuisine, not only for marinating meats, but also for making cornstarch slurries, you know, when you put cornstarch and water together. Okay, so we're going to put maybe about a teaspoon of this. Now this is important for two reasons. It's going to help the wet ingredients in the marinade adhere to the pork, which makes it more flavorful. Okay? And also it will provide a coating of sorts, so that when you cook the meat, it'll sear the juices in, which is very important. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit more. Okay. A teaspoon, 2 teaspoons or so. Some salt. Okay. What did I do with the salt? Okay, this is the thing. Oh, here it is. All right, salt to taste. Okay. Sugar. Now I know you're thinking, what? Yes, a little sugar helps to enhance the flavor, but not too much. You don't want this to taste of sugar. Just literally a dash. Like that. Okay. Now it's time for your wet ingredients. Okay. Soy sauce. Let's talk soy sauce. So, there are many ways you can categorize soy sauce in Chinese cooking. I'll use the 3-category method. Okay, so what you need for this marinade is dark soy sauce. Okay. Now dark soy sauce, and it says, you can see here, dark soy sauce. Dark soy sauce is a very thick, dark, as the name would suggest, dark, sort of black, thick soy sauce, and it has a very rich flavor. It's not that salty, okay, but it's very thick because oftentimes they will add molasses. The manufacturer will add molasses or caramel to it. You can see my hands have gotten stained because of the some of the, when I poured it, sometimes it comes out on the bottle. Okay, so this will give depth of flavor, but not too much saltiness. Now you add just basically a drop or 2 drops of this. This is very powerful stuff. This tastes good, but also it's kind of like, I call it Chinese food coloring. It'll dye anything, this color. Okay, so Chinese use this for marinades, also for making certain braised dishes. Literally just a little bit. If you add too much, it's going to get way too dark. And be careful of your clothes. Don't do that. Don't touch your clothes and stain them. Okay. Now I'm going to just rinse my hands off because I've got vestiges of this dark soy sauce on. Then you need to add in some ginger. Now I've peeled and minced some ginger here. Okay. You do need to use fresh ginger for this. It's quite mandatory. Powdered ginger definitely will not work. Okay, you don't want to use that. Powdered ginger is good for things like gingerbread or gingerbread cake, but not for this kind of cooking. Okay. Now, oh, I just forgot to mention that was dark soy sauce. There's also light soy sauce, which is lighter in color, as the name would suggest, and it's salty. And we're going to use some of this in the stir fry. Okay, but this is lighter in color and it's much saltier than dark soy sauce. And this is used often for, you add to stir fries to provide salt and a savoriness. Also use it in dipping sauces. Okay. Now I mentioned my three category soy sauce. Okay. The other soy sauce you often see is what can be called a generic all-purpose soy sauce. And have you guys ever gone to a Chinese restaurant? An American Chinese restaurant, and on tables they have glass bottles of soy sauce. Sometimes they look like this. I'll show you the container. But sometimes they look like this. Have you guys seen like these kind of containers? And you'll see some diners adding soy sauce into their meals. This is a generic all-purpose soy sauce. Okay, and if you can't find dark soy sauce, you can just use that. It's fine. Just add a little bit in. Okay, but if you have dark soy sauce, that would be best. But if you don't, you can just use all-purpose soy sauce. Now, if you go to the supermarket, I'm not talking about Asian supermarkets. If you just go to a regular grocery store, they will probably have soy sauce, and it'll probably be, if it just says soy sauce and it doesn't indicate light or dark, that's probably the all-purpose soy sauce, which you could use, but just remember, add a little bit because it's very salty. Don't add too much. Okay, but if you can get dark soy sauce, definitely use dark soy sauce. Okay. So we've got that. Then add some oil. The reason we add just vegetable or corn oil, just a little bit. And the reason we add this in is because this will help just give a nice, it'll help make the pork more moist, okay? Because pork loin is a very lean cut of meat. Now the final ingredient you add is you need to add some alcohol. Okay? So traditionally in Chinese cooking we would add something called Shaoxing rice wine. This is sort of a fermented rice wine which you can get at Asian specialty stores. Shaoxing rice wine. Shaoxing is the area in which this is mainly produced. It's a fermented rice wine made with fermented rice and other grains. Okay, it has a nice sweetness to it. You could even drink this straight if you wanted to. The comparison that's frequently made is with dry sherry. So many Chinese, if you watch Chinese cooking shows or things like that, the presenter will sometimes say, "Oh, add some rice wine, and if you don't have it, use dry sherry." I always think, well, if you don't have this at home, who has dry sherry lying around? I mean, I don't. Do you? I mean, if you do, kudos to you, but I don't have it. So you can add this. Now, if you don't have this, there's no reason, especially during coronavirus times, to go out just to get a bottle of this. Use whatever you have lying around. If you have sort of a bottle of some leftover white wine, dry to medium dry white wine, like a Chardonnay, add some of that. Add a dash or two of that. If you have some dry red wine, dry to medium dry red wine, like a Merlot or something, add a little bit of that. You can omit this if you want. You can omit the alcohol, although I think it makes it taste a bit better in the end. The alcohol cooks off and you're left with a nice flavor. Now I have just this, I'm going to use this because I have it lying around. Scotch whiskey. Okay. And if you have that bottle of scotch in your cupboard that's been there for ages, you can add that. Again, not much though, just literally like just 1 drop or 2. Okay, I use the cap for measuring. It's my sort of measuring tool. Okay, there's a little bit, and the good thing is, of course, if there's a little bit left over, you can just, just enjoy it. Excuse me for a minute. Good. All right. So that's that. And then you just mix the marinade up. And again, this is an all-purpose marinade that you can use in your stir fries. And it'll help keep your meat nice and moist. You know, the technique is not unlike some techniques in Western cooking. So do you guys know for Italian cuisine sometimes if you're making like a, I don't know, chicken marsala or something like that, have you noticed what do the chefs do? They first coat the chicken in some flour, right? And then they saute the chicken breast or whatever. It's the same idea because the flour helps seal in the juices and helps the seasoning adhere. It's like an adhesive, helps it adhere to the meat. Well, similarly, this is what the cornstarch does. Okay, so once the meat is mixed up, you're done with that. Now we have some aromatics here. I'll show you some other aromatics. Some minced garlic, about 2 to 3 cloves of garlics I've just minced, and chili. This is optional. If you eat spicy, go for it. If you don't, you can omit it. This is Thai chili, or sometimes called Thai bird. Bird is some cuckoo cuckoo chili. It looks like this. Okay. And basically what I do is I cut the stem off, and then I just take my knife and mince it. I keep the seeds and everything because we like spicy. But if you don't like spicy, you can omit this. If you don't have this chili and you want to add chili to this, you could use whatever chili you like. Jalapeno would work. If you don't have any fresh chili and you want chili, it's fine. Add this. Add some. You can use red pepper flakes, dried red pepper flakes. I think the Italians call this peperoncino, dried red pepper flakes. I don't know about you, but I remember when I used to get takeout pizza in America, you know, sometimes they would give you little packets of dried red pepper flakes, and sometimes you use them, sometimes you don't, and you end up compiling a rather nice stash of those in your pantry. Well, you can break one out and use it in lieu of the fresh ones if you want some chili flavor, but you don't have fresh, okay? Okay, so now we can start to do the, now let's check on our cucumbers. Now this has been sitting for a while. I think, what has it been, 10 minutes or so? And can you guys see, it's hard to see, but can you see that water there? You guys see that water there? That water is all the water that leached out of the cucumber. You can see it. And that is wonderful that it leached out, okay? Now what we're gonna do is, the sink is behind the camera so you won't be able to see this. I'm gonna squeeze the cucumbers to get any more water out, rinse them in water to get the salt out, and then what you do is take paper towels and pat it dry, okay? Okay, so we've got, and now I have a wok here. I've added some oil in. This is corn oil, you can use vegetable oil, and get the medium heat, get it kind of hot. And then the first thing you're going to do is you're going to add your pork in, okay, into the hot oil. And what we're doing here is we're going to seal the meat. Lock in those juices. Get the alcohol cooked out. The smell is wonderful. You can smell the ginger and the scotch. Now, literally 20 to 30 seconds. You're just searing the meat. Okay? You can see it. Right? Now, you're going to put this back in the same bowl that you marinated in. Now, don't worry. I know some of you might be thinking, well, wait a minute. There was raw pork in here. We're going to be cooking the pork again with the cucumbers and sauteing everything together. So it'll cook again. And also keep in mind, this pork is probably not cooked all the way through. But that's fine, because what we're doing here is just searing it. It's the same technique in Western cooking. You know, sometimes if you're making a stew or if you're preparing a roast, you sear the meat first in a pan with hot oil, right, or a hot fat. and then you take it out and then you put it in the oven or in the stew. The inside is still not fully cooked, but we sear it. Okay, it's the same idea here. You just take it in, and there's some oil left over from, we'll keep that in there. And then add in your garlic and your chili. Okay. If the pan looks a little bit dry, just add some more oil, which I will do. Just a little bit more. And then just let this cook and let the garlic soften. Meanwhile, I'm gonna just wipe the floor a little bit because I think a piece of pork just fell down. Let's take an antibacterial wipe here and just wipe the counter. Okay. There we go. Gotta keep a clean kitchen. And we're just softening the garlic, you can see, right? We're not looking for caramelization. And here's a tip: if you find your wok is getting too hot while you're sauteing, you don't have to turn down the heat. Just lift it up and move it around a little bit. Okay? Be careful not to burn the garlic. Okay. Once the garlic is a little bit soft, take your cucumbers and add it in. Can you guys see the cucumbers? You see how they've almost shrunk because we've rinsed them. We've squeezed the water out and we've dried them. So add them into the garlic. Smells lovely already. And then stir fry. And at this point, it's going to be very fast. Now, add some salt to taste. Add some chicken seasoning. This is just chicken seasoning powder. Again, if you don't have this, you can get it at an Asian supermarket. If you don't have it, just like a pinch. If you don't have it, you can use chicken bouillon, stock cube, crumbled up, add a pinch of that, or just omit it. Just stir this in. Okay. You can see that the cucumbers are, I'll show you, cooking very nicely. You know, as a parent myself, I know it's always difficult to get kids to eat vegetables, right? I think it's sort of a perennial struggle for parents. But try cooking vegetables Chinese style. A lot of flavor. Your kids may like it too. Of course, for young children, you may want to omit the chili if they're not accustomed to eating chili. And basically, we just stir fry this for, you know, I would say 4 to 5 minutes. You're basically just heating through the cucumbers and cooking out any of the excess liquid. Okay, then what do? Add your meat back in. Okay, so add this back into the stir fry. All of the juices too. Add that in there. And then put this in the sink. Okay. And then stir fry the meat with the cucumber. So this is what I meant by we seared the meat first, and then we cook it again. Okay. Now, why do we do that? You might be wondering, why do we sear the meat, take it out, and then put it back? And why just not leave it in there and save the step? We don't leave it in there because if you keep the pork in there from the very beginning, it's going to become overcooked, and it's going to become tough and dry, and it's going to be terribly unpleasant. Okay, so, and then basically you just saute this, you know, maybe 3 to 4 more minutes. Okay. I'm going to add just a drop, literally a drop of light soy sauce. Not too much. That's it. Remember, soy sauce in Chinese cuisine is essentially a condiment or flavoring agent. You don't want to go overboard with it. A little bit goes a long way. And then, I'll show you what it looks like. Let's see what it looks like. Then take a clean pair of chopsticks, okay, and taste for seasoning. Delicious. You can take the ginger. The cucumbers have not become watery and overcooked. They're nice and crisp because of the technique we use, the salting and then the rinsing of it. This dish is done. So take a plate. Right into the give it a shake on the plate. And there you have it. Cucumbers and sauteed pork Chinese style. Thanks again for watching, and obviously for this dish you would serve this with white rice. This would probably feed, this is a smaller portion, this would probably feed 2 people or so. But if you're feeding family, just double the number of cucumbers and the number of pork. Okay. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time on another episode of Norman's Asian Home Cooking. Bye-bye.